There are two kinds of people in this world. The people who fail to do what they know they should, and those who keep doing things they know they shouldn't. Guess what? You're both. Hi, I'm your host, life and business coach, Marcy Barker, aka your loving kick in the pants. In this podcast, I'll teach you the 6 steps of my accountability code that will help you wake up with clarity and show up with aligned action steps that make follow through easy and peaceful. All right, let's jump in. Hello, my beautiful people. I am so excited to bring you another episode of Your Loving Kick in the Pants. With this episode, my intention is for you to listen to it and actually want to do something. Yes, there will be times where you just got to do it and you don't want to, but I hope to inspire you by showing you the possibilities and opportunities that are available to you when you take action. So today I have my new friend, April Hyatt, on, and I met her in Lady Bosses. And if you're listening to the podcast and you're like, what even is this Lady Bosses of Utah group I keep hearing about? It's a Facebook group for women in business, and it's pretty amazing. So April, thank you for being on my podcast and for joining that group. Welcome.
Thank you. Yeah. And it's an awesome group, by the way, very supportive women that are really just there trying to support each other. So it's an awesome group.
I am pretty proud of it. We learned recently that our group is 99% engaged. And I will take credit because I do kick out a lot of people who are just not following the rules, advertising without really giving and sharing value. And April, you are a branding and web designer and strategist. So when I read your application, I was like, everybody needs this because you talk about being in line, not just personally, but bringing that on the internet and being in alignment so that everybody knows exactly what you do. And I started my online business in 2015, primarily with like internet marketing and YouTube. And I would go to these YouTube events and I was so surprised at how people would act in person and how I saw them in their videos. And it was very eye-opening for me. So before we get into a ton of stuff like that, tell us a little bit about yourself, your stage of life, and what brought you to the profession that you're in right now.
Yeah, you bet. So I am a empty nester, mom of 3. I've been married for 29 years. My oldest daughter is, I should know this off the top of my head, 27. And my youngest daughter turns 21 this year. And we don't have any grandkids yet. We're crossing our fingers, hoping that we get some soon because our 2 oldest are married. And I love being an empty nester. I love that my kids are grown up and I talk to them often. And when they call and they have struggles, I just say, hey, you know what? You are so smart. Let me know how you figure that out. And if I can support you, let me know. And it is the best to just not have to figure stuff out anymore, I guess. I don't know. But I became a website designer because several years ago, one of my children was struggling with some mental health concerns. And I was a stay-at-home mom for a long time. And I was looking for help for him and I just couldn't find it. And it was a very specific kind of help that he needed. And it's just really hard to find with mental health help for teenagers and younger kids. And so I had a friend that said, hey, April, check out this business. I think they're what you need. And so I went online and I checked them out and I was like, yeah, no, they just looked awful online, to be honest with you. And I thought, yeah, this isn't it. And so the friend followed up and said, April, hey, did you contact them? And I said, yeah, no, I didn't. They just didn't look like what I was looking for and don't think it's a good fit. And she said, no, April, I promise you, this is what you need. And so she just went on and on about how I needed to contact them. And I thought, okay, because you're telling me I will do it, but I'm telling you, they just don't look good. And so I contacted them and actually they really were exactly what he needed. It was the perfect fit. He got the help that he needed. Like, it was great. And so as I got to know the business and the owner, probably about a year into it, I said to him, the owner of the business, I said, hey, I almost didn't call you because your website looks so bad. It does not reflect how awesome you guys are over here and the cool things that you do. And basically the help that all of us moms are looking for who have kids in this situation. And he said, well, do you want to do my website for me? And I said, okay, sure. Sure. I would love to do that. I've not built a website before. So I'm one of those people that before I do something, I will go learn absolutely everything I possibly can about it. and maybe overachiever. I don't know, but I just spent a lot of time studying and learning and taking courses. And then anyway, I built his website. I built other websites for his business. And then I just started getting referrals from a lot of the people that he worked with. He would refer me to people, they would refer me to people. And I've been doing that for 7 years full time now. And I love it. It was kind of fun because I found out, wow, I really have a passion for this. I'm good at it. I like it. And I just feel like I can help people in the background. And the biggest thing is I thought I am helping other moms because I know what it feels like to be in a place where you're trying to help your kids and you cannot find the help anywhere.
That resonates with me big time. Number one, because you're willing to do the research, but it wasn't just because you took it from a business perspective first. It was like, no, I'm looking for a specific answer. And as a life and business coach, I help a lot of my clients attract more clients. And this is the same sort of conversation we have is, what are you offering right now? Well, here's what I do, this, and this. And I'm like, but do they know? Do they actually know what you're up to? And are you speaking to their pain points? Are you providing a solution? And are you living your message? Like, that's the most important part. So when I read your application, I want to share my quote again, and my listeners have heard this before, but I live my life and my business by the saying, true happiness comes only when our spirits learn to control our bodies, training them to be governed by the laws of God. And you talk about alignment big time. So I love that you can tie it into business, but there's also a deeper meaning here of like, do it in your own life first. Hey listeners, the message of waking up and showing up is yours for the taking. In fact, it's free. I've recorded my entire audiobook and I'd love for you to consume it between episodes. Head to marcybarker.com to get instant access to the accountability code Wake Up and Show Up. All right, let's jump back in. As you were searching for answers for your son, what was that thing that you were looking for him? Like, how did you know what was right and what was like, this is not the solution for us? How are you able to understand or feel or know which path to go down?
So honestly, I just went with my gut. Like, it was a feeling. It was just meeting with the people, but really learning about the company, learning who the therapists were. And, this is going to sound really weird, but this particular company has probably, 15 different therapists that work with them. And we looked at the pictures of the different therapists and was like, okay, I think my son will connect with this guy or this guy just based on a picture, which is why it's so important that you really look like you online and you don't have like some glamour shot or whatever. Because my son was very much into sports and was athletic and, all of those things. And he wanted to work with a male therapist who was into sports, who kind of could, who could relate to him and who he could just look at a picture of the guy that looked friendly and natural and inviting and say, yeah, that's the guy. That's who I want to work with. And he narrowed it down to like 2 and he met with them both. But it was interesting because the very first guy that he was drawn to right off the bat was exactly the one that he thought, yeah, this is the guy. But at the end of the day, you just have to go with your gut and you got to stick with that. Don't second guess yourself because usually your first gut reaction is 99% right. Just go with it and be confident in that and just move forward. We can make decisions and we can second guess them all day long. And I think, Marcy, I was listening to this in your book, even or maybe one of your podcasts, that somebody was saying, yeah, I would decide something and then I would have all these things come up, tell me, no, you can't do it or whatever. And don't second guess yourself. Just go for it. Like, especially as moms, you will get inspiration for your kids. So if you think something is right, just go for it. Don't second guess it.
Yes, I love that. Okay, so it's clear you're a very outgoing person. And it's also clear that you have a level of honesty that is required for you to move forward. So I'm seeing or noticing a pattern of like, you ask the hard questions and you say the things that need to be said. Where did you learn that?
Hard Knocks. I didn't used to be this way. It's so funny. So before we started the podcast, you asked me, Marcy, is there anything off limits? And I thought, no, I'm a pretty open book for most stuff, but I didn't used to be that way. I used to be really closed off. I used to be very much if things were going on in my household or my kids were struggling with something, I wouldn't tell anybody because I thought I was protecting my kids. And in a way I was. I mean, there are certain things that I'm not going to say to protect them, but there are things that need to be said because we need to connect to other people and we need to get the help that we need. And I finally realized that if I will open my mouth and speak up and ask the hard questions and say things based on my own experience, that other people will step forward and say, oh my gosh, April, thank you so much for saying that because I'm in the same boat and I've struggled with that thing too. And that's how I got help for my son, was finally being confident enough to say, you know what, I've just got to ask somebody that I trust and see where it goes. And then I found that there are hundreds of other moms in the same situation that I was in, and they're just afraid to say anything. And so I thought, man, I got to speak up because somebody's got to do this. And so the more I started doing that, the more confident I became in doing that. And then when my youngest daughter had different mental health struggles, by that point, I was like, no big deal. I'm just going to ask around. I know how to get the answer now. I know to talk. I know to speak up. I know to say the things that other people are afraid to say, because as soon as you do, there's 20 other people that'll go, oh yeah, that's me too. Thanks for saying that.
Yes, I love that. I think we just found our little voice clip. Like that's the part that we're going to feature, because speaking up is so, so important. And I actually have a story in my book that's called Speaking Up. And it's exactly what you just said. Like as soon as I spoke up to this very abusive and emotionally manipulative person, everybody else in my circle was like, thank you, finally. And guess what happened to me? And they started speaking too. So listeners, if you haven't yet gotten my ebook and my audiobook, you totally can. And the story that I'm referencing is in the humility chapter, and it's called Standing Up, or on page 58 if you have the book. So speaking up, I love that. Another thing I noticed is that you're on the other side of getting your kids help. And I feel like it is such a blessing that people are willing to talk in a way that they weren't 5 or 10 years ago. Okay, so here's another question, because I am the same way of speaking up, asking the hard questions. Do you have a filter? What is your filter? Do you ever get in those situations where you're like, maybe I don't need to speak up right now? Maybe it's time for me to just listen. What is that like for you? And I'm asking for a friend, AKA me, because that's something I'm working on.
Yes. So a couple of things that I have learned is, one, you do have to let other people talk. Let me finish my sentence. But when they start talking and they're telling a personal story, let them keep going, because our natural inclination, and I do the same thing. I have these thoughts and I have to consciously say, April, don't say anything. Our natural inclination is to go, oh yeah, me too. And then start talking about your own situation. And now this other person is over here going, okay, I just wanted to tell my story. I just needed somebody to talk to. And now you've like switched it and made it about you. And so I've learned just in talking to other moms and listening to them, and then also from my own situation where I finally open up and talk to somebody, I don't want them to tell me about themselves. I know that sounds awful, but there are times where I'm like, I just want to talk about me for a second. Can you just listen? And so having been on both sides of that, I just had to learn from being observant, being in those situations. And then I have some really good friends that I've learned from that are really, really good at that. They're really good at listening, and they're very good at asking me questions too in a positive way. And so they'll say things like, April, have you ever considered this? And then it'll get me thinking about that, which instead of saying, oh, you know what, you should totally do this, where I go, no, I'm not, and then your natural inclination is to go, no, I want to do this myself or whatever. So they just very kindly say, well, have you considered this option, or have you thought about this? And in kind of just being in that space with them, I learned from them to, one, be able to listen. And then two, if I'm in a situation where I can see that people might be struggling, but everybody's kind of afraid to speak up, then yeah, that's when you say, I got to speak up, because I know, like we talked about, if one person does, then it kind of breaks the ice and other people will. It's a hard place to be. It's hard to read the room sometimes. It's hard to figure that out. I say that like it's totally easy to do, but it's a skill that you just have to work on all the time, overtime, forever.
So bringing this online to the people who are listening, women in business, where do you feel like is a good place to start? Should somebody look at their alignment online first, or do you think they need to do the inner work first to say, what's going on in my life so I can show up online? It's kind of like chicken or the egg. Which one comes first, would you say? Or what situation are people in when they approach you and want help?
So, wow, that's a lot of different questions. Okay. Let me start with the first. So I think that you do need to start with a little bit of inner work, because a lot of us have ideas for a business. And I get a lot of people that come to me and go, hey, bro, I want to do this for my business, but they haven't thought it all through yet. And there's a lot of different pieces that you have to think through. Now, I know there's a phrase out there, just get started, and it doesn't have to be perfect and all those things. And I completely agree with those things. You just have to take action and get going. But you kind of have to have an idea of where it is you're going first. So you do need to do a little bit of inner work. You need to decide, who you are and what your personality is. Like, for example, when you're figuring out your brand, you want to reflect you, but you got to know who you is first. Are you the outgoing, friendly, fun? For example, like my website colors, I've got this bright purple, and I do have some, basic neutral colors for that part of me, but I am kind of more out there and outgoing. So I've got more bright stuff. Whereas somebody else is probably going to have things that are just calmer and more neutral if, that's what they're looking for. So figure out who you are first, and then sit down and figure out, okay, this is the kind of business that I want to have based on the personality that I have. If you're not an outgoing person in, whoa, and so exciting and doing all these things, you probably don't want a business where you're speaking in front of people all the time, if that scares you to death, where you're, creating retreats where you have to be front and center all the time. So figure out who you are and then what your skills are that you can offer people, and then move forward. And then you can kind of do both at the same time. You could be working on yourself and then starting your business and growing that and, building all of those things. And then you do have to make sure you really are in alignment with what feels good to you and what you're comfortable in doing. So if there's something you don't like to do in your business, you don't have to do it. You're going to get all kinds of voices. It's kind of funny when you start a business and you start trying to learn about it, there are thousands of different ideas out there. And there's all kinds of people telling you, do this and do this and do this and do this. And when you're first starting, first of all, it's really overwhelming. And second, if you try to do all the things, you're not going to be good at any of them, but it's just too much. So pick the ones that you really like and that you feel good about, and then go with those. So I'm just going to use social media as an example, just because it's an easy one. But there are a lot of social media platforms. There's Instagram and Facebook and TikTok and Pinterest and YouTube and Twitter and LinkedIn. And I know not all of those are social media, but you get the idea. There's all those things. Don't try to do them all at the same time. And if there's one of those you don't like, you don't have to do it. It's okay. For example, I am not on Instagram, which is kind of funny because I have a visual business, and you would think that that's a place that I would be. But it's just not my thing. I don't know why. It just isn't for me personally. And then I thought, but I heard all these people saying, April, you really need to be there. Your visual business, you should totally be there. So I started a whole Instagram account. I spent hours on it. I hired somebody to help me. They got it all set up. They started growing it, and it started growing well. But it just was so stressful. Like, I could feel myself be tense all the time about it. And I wasn't even the one doing it. The first thing in the morning, I would get up and I'd pull up my phone and go, how many followers do I have today? And how many new ones did I get? And it became this whole overwhelming thing in my life. And then what's really interesting is a few months back, Instagram had this funny little glitchy thing, and they started deleting accounts. And mine was one of those that got totally deleted. Like, I'd spent months building it and they just deleted it. No recourse, no nothing. But then I was like, you know what? That is such a huge relief. Like, I don't have to do it anymore. And I can't even tell you how many hours I got back in the day. And just the just the conscious, I don't know, it was a tenseness I didn't even know I felt until I didn't feel it anymore. And then I was like, okay, I don't have to do this. And in fact, Marcy, I was listening to your book, and there's a story in there that you talk about a lady who is trying to choose an exercise plan. And I think she's talking about running or something, but she hates to run. And you say to her, well, what do you like to do? And she says, I like to dance. And so that became her plan. And I was like, yes, that's what you need to do, is just do what you love and shut off the other voices. It's okay to do that.
Yes. And the feeling you just described is what I like to define as easy and peaceful. When you are in alignment and you are accountable to what you need to do, you can literally feel a weight being lifted off of you, and releasing an expectation that is not fit for you feels so good. And yes, that particular client, it was like, this makes total sense. Like, why in the world would I force myself to run? And I think listeners can listen to this and say, why in the world am I forcing myself to be on Instagram or to be on LinkedIn or to be on YouTube? Because I'm the same way. I used to do it all. And I'm like, no, I love Facebook. I love my Facebook group. And I've also gone through a transition lately over the last year or two of not being a personal trainer and nutrition coach anymore, and shifting into life and business because, I spent a whole year working on my website in a very fast, competitive way because I was part of a production where it needed to happen, and spent all this time elevating myself as a life and fitness coach. And the more I kept working on it and the more I kept working with my clients, they're like, you're not really our fitness coach. You're kind of our business coach. The life coaching is always going to be there. And I thought, you know what? That is 100% true. And that's what resonates right now. So I decided I'm not a life and fitness coach anymore. I'm a life and business coach. And I actually got kind of irritated when people ask me about fitness because I'm like, no, it doesn't light me up. It doesn't feel in alignment. And so I'm definitely in that phase where I'm like, it's time for me to update all of my branding because I don't even like looking at my old logo colors. But guess what? They're still there. They're still there. So I need to update those things. And it is very important for me to do that online because it's like in person, I've got it down. But, I can only be in one place at one time. So doing it online is super important. So tell me about one of your most recent clients and how they've seen success from updating their brand and updating their presence, both in person and online with you.
So yeah, that's great. I work with, it's kind of an interesting niche that I work with. I work specifically with coaches because I'm really good at building that type of website. I understand them. I understand what it needs, their needs. And I also work with authors who either have several books out or even brand new authors who have their first book out. And you wouldn't think that there's an overlap in there, but there usually is, because most people that are writing a book have a story to tell or have a background or whatever. And then they're also coaching people in, all the things that they've learned, whether they're doing it in their book or actual one-on-one coaching. There's quite a bit of overlap, but there's a couple of different recent clients, but the one that I'm thinking of off the top of my head is, I usually work with women, but this was a man actually that I was working with, and he is amazing, but he works specifically with first responders and their mental health. And he does both coaching, and then he's also a therapist, but he does speaking and coaching. And he just finished his master's degree, and I thought, I'm going to start my business. And this was probably about 6 months ago. And so he came to me and he said, okay, April, let's get this figured out. What do I need to do? And so we worked together, we built his website, and 6 months later, he is blowing it up. Now, it's not just because his website, I'm not naive enough to say it was totally because he has the most amazing website in the world, which he does, but it's because he gets out there, but he's doing what he loves, and he talks about it all the time, wherever he is. And honestly, he's just a nice guy. And so when you go to his website and you see pictures of him, you think, oh, I want to get to know that guy. Like, I was working with him and I'm reading his bio and I've talked to him on the phone, but I've actually never met him in person. And I keep thinking, I need to meet him because he is the coolest guy ever. And he is exactly the same on his website. You just see his pictures and you go, oh, he's so cool. And then you read his, like in the wording, I'm really big on messaging that it needs to sound like you. So when somebody's reading your website or reading a blog or reading your book or whatever, and just a little side note, I love, Marcy, that your book, you have done the audio on it. It's your voice in there and it's totally you. So I love that. But all of your other talking and messaging, when I meet him in person, I know he's going to sound exactly the same. It's going to be the same guy. And I think that's what makes him so successful, is that he really is the same nice guy person wherever it is, wherever he happens to be, whether you see him online or whatever. Anyway, when I work with clients, I'm just really big on making sure that their website really reflects who they are and what their business is and who they help and how they help them.
As I was running Lady Bosses and getting to know more women, I'm always checking to see if they're following the rules. And I found one person who just kept sharing her prices after prices after prices. And I messaged her and I said, hey, I want to let you know this is against our rules, but I want to help you. You have something to offer and it looks really awesome, but we don't know you. You've never done an introduction post. We don't know the face behind it. And she was like, it's fine. I'll leave the group. And I was like, no, that's not what I meant. Don't leave the group. Like, I want to help you. And so luckily she made the choice to confide in me and say, well, here's what I need to work on, or like, what even is a value post that you talk about? And we began talking and she started to trust me. And I felt like, okay, I'm helping her grow her business by educating her clientele, attracting her clients. And so I asked her, I said, hey, I took a look at your website. Can I offer you a piece of feedback? And she said, yes. And I said, you need a picture of yourself. Like, if you are going to health coach people, they need to know what you look like. They need to know who is behind the Zoom calls, who's behind the phone calls. And she was resistant to do it because she was hiding. She didn't want her friends and family to know what she was doing, but she was trying to start a business. And when she got to the point of the inner work of like, no, I'm free to be seen. It's okay if people see me. It's okay if people know, her business really took off. And as cool as it is for a client to have a business grow, it's super cool when people are just confident in who they are and their message and what they do. So I firmly believe in what you do. And for listeners, if you're like, I don't have a picture of myself up, or like, I don't like doing selfies or whatever, I highly encourage you to pinpoint why you have resistance to that, because people can't buy from you or benefit from you if they don't know who you are. And you can't share it if you don't know who you are, just like you said, April. So with that, I absolutely love your message. And I think that it's so applicable, not just to business, but also in life of, showing up how you want to show up, because that's the impact that you're going to have on other people. So back to that story at the very beginning, when I did YouTube, family blogging and vlogging was like huge. People were putting their daily life on the internet. And I started a channel because I wanted to document my family life. And so I started doing it. And I remember having to make my very first video on YouTube, and I was scared out of my mind. I told my husband, I said, you need to leave the house and you need to take all of the kids, and I'm going to do my first video. And I sat there at my kitchen table and I talked to my camera for like 8 minutes on this topic of boycotting perfection and all of that. And doing it is the only thing that helped me take the next step, because a lot of people, they will say, oh, I can't do it for this reason, or I'm too scared, or what if I mess up, or whatever. And it's like, no, you just got to do it. You have to do it and start developing yourself, because that's how you learn. So what would you say is one of the biggest takeaways you've had in the last couple of weeks as you're learning to grow and growing as a person and growing as a business owner? What kind of self-development have you done that you're like, this impacted me, I'm going to work on that, or keep it with me?
So I think for me, this is going to sound funny, but it's getting over myself. Like for like your example on getting on YouTube and stuff, I've had to make videos for courses, and I did the same thing at first. I was like, oh, I got to be on camera and I got to look perfect, and I don't want this to show or this to show, and maybe I got some wrinkles by my eyes or whatever. And then I thought, April, get over yourself. Seriously, nobody is looking at that, and nobody cares. They're really just listening to what you have to say, and they want to connect with you. And then I thought, you don't have a problem meeting people in person. You go in person and you don't worry if you have wrinkles around your eyes. You don't worry about, those little things. Why in the world would I worry about it on a camera where I'm just basically meeting somebody one-on-one? And so once I started telling myself, just get over yourself, nobody's thinking about you nearly as much as you're thinking about you, then I can totally do it. The same goes true, like, for example, when I'm coaching some of my clients on building a brand or designing a logo or something, and they'll spend hours and hours and hours on it. And I finally just say, you know what? Let me, and so I'll ask them, I'll say, okay, like Marcy, who is a coach that you work with that you love? And you'll tell me, and I'll say, what does their logo look like? And you go, I don't know. I have no idea what it looks like. I can tell you all about the person and what they look like and what they do, but I don't know what their logo looks like. And I'll say, exactly, that's the point. And then I'll say, okay, and what shirt were they wearing yesterday? And you'll say, I have no idea. I didn't notice. I mean, maybe you did, but most of the time you don't, and you don't remember. So all those little details that we are so worried about, most of the time people are not noticing, and they're not remembering any of that stuff. So just, I don't know, my advice to myself included is just get over yourself and keep going, because nobody else is noticing.
Yeah, I love that. I absolutely love that. I met up with somebody yesterday. I have a contact online. She sends me referrals here and there. And she was like, I have somebody that needs to know you. Can you meet up? And I said, yeah, that's fine. But I need you to tell me, what is this about? Because I've showed up to places where people just try to sell me something, and I am not in for that. And she said, no, it's nothing like that. But this person really, needs to know you. So I thought, you know what, that's fine. I can go and offer it my time. And it turned into one of those situations where I was like, okay, this is a time not for me to talk. This person just needs to be heard. They need to be seen, and they need to know that I'm here when needed. And so we connected really well. And at the end, I said, can I take a selfie with you? And she was like, oh, no, you cannot. And I was like, what? And I respect people, but I always get a little sad that they don't see what I see. Because I'm like, I just want to document this. I want to remember who you are. And all of a sudden she was like, no, this is wrong, and this is wrong, and do this side and this side. And we joked, and I took a selfie with her standing behind me. And she was like, that's perfect. And I was like, no, I think that is such a good reminder of, especially when you say nobody's thinking about you more than you. And I think that's impossible for anybody to think about me more than I think about myself. Right. But I do think there's a lot of power in letting people see your true countenance. Like, yes, they don't care about your tooth that might be crooked, or the dent in your chin, or whatever. And that is a true sign of acceptance, when you allow somebody to see you for who you are. And that's, if you're running a business online, people, you got to get over that. Like, you have to understand that people are here to listen to your message, and they don't care what you look like. They care how you treat yourself. And that's one of the biggest reasons I switched from fitness into life and business is nobody's going to read your BMI at your funeral. Nobody's going to be like, here was her body fat percentage. And my husband's like, I'm going to read yours just because you say that. But really, I mean, people are following you online. They're engaging with you because you have something that resonates with them. There's some sort of level of connection, and that's so powerful. So I love your expertise. I love that you are so good at what you do, because it's needed. And I think that this was extremely valuable for people who are listening. So I appreciate your time. And I guess for one last question, as you were preparing, because you're just like me, you're like, no, I listened to the book, I listened to some podcasts. I might already know the answer, but what's something that I could improve upon in my branding online that you saw? Because we're fairly new to each other. So you've done some research, but you haven't known me for years and years. So I guess, like, what's just one tip that I could improve upon?
So honestly, I'm almost afraid to say it, but So I researched you before I came on this podcast. I listened to your book, I listened to your podcast, I did all the things because I want to make sure that I'm going to connect with the person too, and that my values are in alignment with your values. And, because I don't go on just any podcast because whatever I'm on reflects me also. So I want to make sure that you and I connect and we're in alignment, which we are, which is awesome. But what I noticed is actually exactly what you said earlier is I went to your website. I think it's the fun and sustainability, but it looked to me like it was all about health coaching and whatever. And then I thought, wait, is that what she does? Because it sounds like she does this other stuff. And so honestly, it took me a while to figure out not who you were, because I felt like I knew you because I totally stalked you online. You know what I mean? Like in a positive way, not in a negative stalking way, but I wanted to get to know you a little bit first. And so I saw who you were online and I thought, she's awesome. In your book, I listened to it. And then when I went to your website, I thought, it's not the same business. It's the same person. I could see that the person was the same, but the business and how you were saying what you did and who you helped was off for me. It didn't feel like it was in alignment. So
yes, everybody, if you're listening to this, do not visit funandsustainable.com. Marcy Barker. Yeah, it's definitely something that is a big thing I need to work on. And I'm so glad that I found you because you seem like the perfect person that can help. But yeah, with that, I definitely need to get it done because that phase of my life where I was optimizing my website, including this book has tons of QR codes in it that take people to places that maybe I don't want them to go to.
Right.
And getting that updated will help me release the rest of what I need to release. So I appreciate everything that you do. And it's very important. It's very, very important. So I'm glad that we had the time to chat. And we have all of your links. We'll put it all in the show notes when it comes out. But if you could pick one place for people to connect with you, where would you like that to be?
Honestly, my website. I've got pretty much not my life, but everything I do is on there. And then the other two places, well, you said one is my website, but I'm on Pinterest is where I found that I'm in the Lady Bosses Facebook group. I was in lots of them and I thought a lot of these are just not uplifting. I'm getting out of all of these. So I stayed in this one because it is a positive place, but otherwise my website, and I'm really active on Pinterest.
That's really awesome. Thank you so much, April, for being on my podcast.
Thank you. Yeah, I've enjoyed it.
Hey friends, I want to thank you for listening to this episode of Your Loving Kick in the Pants. If you got any value out of this episode, I would love for you to drop me a review or share with a friend what you learned. All right, I'll see you next Wednesday for Your Loving Kick in the Pants.